The evening she flew into my life was a stormy one. Thunders boogied over my head and a lightning or two dazzled threateningly somewhere close by. Hindsight, that was a sign, but my emotions saw the better of me. I saw her cowered in the corner of my balcony, wet and scared. Her fragile body and docile eyes hit the G-spot of my compassion, and I, like the idiot I am, took her in. Very cautiously, I stepped towards her and extended my arm, believing that I would be the one she'd be scared of. It was probably at that moment she hatched her diabolical plan to transform me into the psychotic outcast I have come to be known as. Who would have imagined that a creature as tiny and meek as the pigeon could hold such power over the human race? Trust me, it will ruin your life. My family and friends warned me. I, however, was adamant. I had always wanted a pet, something to love and take care of, something to be responsible for. Coo, she sang while building her cute little nest on my adjust fan. And although that meant I had to cook my dinner in a smoky, smelly kitchen, I was happy that my humble abode served as an asylum for the poor little creature. Thus began our catastrophic journey together. Initially, I didn't seem to mind either her white droppings all over my balcony or her cooing at odd hours. I'd respond with a chuckle every time she flew over my coffee mug and broke it, simply because she would look at me with an apologetic, guilt-ridden look that I found most endearing. At the least, I had someone to share my morning tea with. So what if she was a little bratty? We even had nicknames for each other. I named her Elizabeth and sometimes called her Your Majesty, and she called me Coo. Trouble started brewing when my mother visited me and Elizabeth let out a little warm poop on her arm. My mother wasn't as fond of her as I was. Naturally, she was annoyed enough to chase her away with a broomstick. I didn't stop Mom, assuming that Her Majesty will be back soon. We have had a few tiffs before, and she'd often fly away, but was back by the sundown. I didn't imagine she'd take this incident to heart. Today, as I walk in my colony, amidst children and women petrified at the sight of me, ignoring hushed murmurs about the state of my mind, I imagine that letting my mom chase Her Majesty with a broomstick may not have been a very good idea. It is natural for people to believe that I am a nutcase, considering how my unkempt hair and stained clothes make me look like I just had shock therapy. I don't blame them. Looks can be deceptive, I'll tell you that. But I assure you, I am not crazy. I am not crazy, it's her. She is the spawn of Satan. Oops, I said that out loud, didn't I? No wonder the lady with the walker extended an astounded glance towards me. A day after my mom left, I was to make a presentation at work. I walked in drowsy and hungover because Her Majesty had kept me up all night. She found her way into the chimney and spent the night performing what can only be explained as animal aerobics in there. When I finally managed to get some shut-eye towards dawn, she flew to my window and sang her coo song till I gave up and got out of my bed. During the presentation, which was already proving to be a snag, someone pointed to me that I had bird poop on my shirt. My clean white starched iron press shirt. The good Lord knows that if a bachelor wears a clean and iron shirt, the occasion is really, really important. But Her Majesty chose just that day to embellish it with her excreta. I let it slide, assuming that it was probably not by intent. But a few days later, I began to notice that all my clothes hung out to dry had her droppings. By the amount of droppings on my clothes, I wouldn't be surprised if she outsourced the task to her other winged friends. I thought I was her only friend. Things escalated soon. The disharmony continued with Her Majesty flying in and out of my house at will and behaving like she was doing me a favor by living with me. I retaliated by leaving the bird feeder and water bowl empty. But she made a major strike when I invited, or rather convinced, a lady friend for a nightcap. The idea was to make her stay over and perform all the naughty things I had in mind. But once we started fooling around after dinner, Her Majesty decided that now would be a great time to do the chimney dance. The sound not only distracted my lady friend, but scared the shit out of her because she believed that she had lived in a haunted house as a child and the memories flashed back. No amount of hitting the chimney with a broomstick could convince her that it wasn't a ghost, rather a nimble, albeit slightly vengeful, winged creature. She wouldn't believe me when I said that Her Majesty was trying to get back at me. Pigeons, I tell you, dear friend, have been rightly described as winged rats. They lurch around your homes and stalk you with their terrifying pointy faces, sharp teeth and claws. People laugh when you say pigeons scare you, but they can scare the shit out of anyone when they want to. That's not it. These evil creatures have the ability to look so demure that you feel like a monster for chasing them away. No wonder they were used as war messengers, those manipulative buggers. Gradually, I began to notice the annoying things that my folks had warned me about. For instance, the food necklaces. Why on earth would you wear an orange peel around your neck? Unless, of course, Miss High and Mighty believed that she is royal blood and needs to be bejeweled. Not to forget the annoying head bob. Whether there's music or not, Her Majesty chose to bob her head to a rhythm of her own. And the pooping. Her Majesty and her friends loved to poop everywhere. Flower pots, utensils, wash linen. They wouldn't even spare the historical leaders whose statues were reminders of their legends. But did Her Majesty have any respect for that? No! And last but not the least, staring. The god-awful, constant staring. Staring at people till they feel naked or as if they have done something terrible. Despite my grievances, I let her stay on. She flew in and out of my adjust fan as she pleased. Head bob and food necklaces and all that. I may have sworn at her a few times out of frustration, but nothing was that bad. That did get me into trouble with my neighbors who complained of noise. I had to pacify everyone during the weekly residents' meeting, promising to keep it down. But it wasn't so bad. People may have mocked me in the neighborhood and at work for my constant complaints about pigeons, but I still felt it was all right. Despite the acrimony, Her Majesty and I continued to share our space, and although we kept to ourselves, I believed that we still had something left between us. I was wrong. I may have forgotten to mention that the residents' meeting wasn't a very amicable one. Although I promised to keep it down and pacify my neighbors, I did get into a heated argument with another tenant. There may have been a fist fight and some people possibly did intervene to break the fight. The tenant lodged a formal complaint against me and I was let go with a warning that I be asked to vacate my flat in case of another misdemeanor. Not in my worst nightmare I could have known that Her Majesty was aware of this. It's a little hard to believe, I agree, but it is true. It so happened that a few days after the meet, I was watering my flowers. I had handpicked my earthen flower pots carefully to create an eclectic look in my garden. One of the pots was slightly misplaced, so I lifted it up to put it back in its proper place. At that exact moment, dear friend, Her Majesty chose to fly into my face. Startled, I let go of the pot. Plonk! Gravity did its job. I didn't realize that someone was walking below, and unfortunately, the heavy earthen pot filled with mud and manure fell on that person's head. As you have guessed by now, it was the same person I had a tiff with during the residents' meeting. Bleeding, angry, and confused, the man screamed bloody murder when he was rushed to the hospital. I tried to explain that it was the pigeon. Her Majesty did it on purpose. She wanted to get back at me. Alas, my voice fell into deaf ears. I was mocked and humiliated and given a 7 days notice to vacate my flat, my beloved flat where I had lived for a decade. I wait for the movers and packers to finish loading my stuff, which has already been kindly evacuated by the new tenants. I walk below my flat for a final glance. I don't like the faces of the new occupants. A little boy fiddles with the one remaining flower pots which we couldn't fit into the truck. The boy attempts to lift the pot. I get an odd feeling in my stomach and look further up. Her Majesty is glaring at me. She bobs her head and looks towards the boy. Did you see that? Did anyone see that? I scream, pointing at her. Her Majesty stares at me, spreads her wings, aims towards the boy's face and stares back at me. I know what's about to happen and freeze. "Coo," she says.